They fired the nanny. They forgot she had proof. The room is quiet in the way that expensive rooms are always quiet. Not silent. Just controlled. Every sound absorbed by the right materials, the right thickness of wall, the right distance from anything ordinary. There is a long table. Dark wood. 3 people on one side, 2 on the other. Claudia Whitfield sits at the center of her side like she has sat at the center of every room she has ever entered, naturally, without effort, as though furniture arranges itself around her. She is wearing ivory. Her posture is perfect. Her expression is the expression of a woman who has already decided how this ends. Across from her, a woman named Adiz Okonkwo sits with her hands flat on the table in front of her. She is not performing calm. She simply is calm, the kind that comes not from certainty about the outcome, but from certainty about the truth. There is a manila folder in front of her. Then another. Then another. 7 of them, side by side, each one labeled in small, precise handwriting. A man in a grey suit, Adiz's attorney, shuffles a single sheet of paper and places it at the center of the table. He says, very quietly, "Before we begin, let's start with Exhibit E." Claudia's attorney glances at the paper. Something shifts behind his eyes. Something small but irreversible. Claudia does not look at it yet. She is still looking at Adiz. And Adiz, for the first time in 14 months, looks back. Before we get into this unbelievable story, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're tuning in from. It's amazing to see how far our Curious Chronicles family reaches. If you love heart-stopping or inspiring stories that make you feel everything, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We share epic, can't look away tales every week. Let's jump in. 14 months earlier. It is a Saturday afternoon in late June, and the Whitfield backyard looks like something out of a lifestyle magazine that doesn't know it's a lifestyle magazine. The kind of perfection that insists on appearing effortless. String lights hang between the oak trees. White linen tablecloths. A grazing board the length of a dining table. 40-something adults standing in clusters with champagne flutes, laughing at the right moments, wearing the right shoes, performing the right version of casual. In the center of the garden, near the back fence, there is an activity station. It is a beautiful thing. A low wooden frame painted in soft primary colors, hung with textured panels, rough burlap, smooth satin, crinkled foil, each one chosen deliberately, each one placed at the exact height for 1-year-old's reaching hands. Beside it, a sensory bin filled with colored rice and small wooden shapes. Beside that, a board with large piece puzzles and a mirror framed in felt. Every element of it is grounded in developmental science. Every element of it was designed, sourced, assembled, and set up by one person. That person is currently standing 30 feet away, holding a silver serving tray. She is wearing an apron she did not bring. Someone handed it to her when she arrived this morning. She did not argue. She put it on and told herself it didn't matter. Her name is Adiz Okonkwo. She has a master's degree in early childhood development from the University of Bridgeport. She has been working with children professionally for 9 years. She has, in the past 11 months, watched Chloe Whitfield learn to hold her own head up, learn to track a moving object with her eyes, learn to reach, learn to sit, learn to pull herself to standing against the edge of a couch, all of it guided, all of it documented, all of it the result of deliberate, evidence-based developmental work that Adiz has been doing every single day, quietly, without acknowledgement, in this house. She knows every milestone. She knows every sound Chloe makes when she's tired versus when she's overstimulated. She knows that Chloe will reach for the foil panel first, always the foil panel, because the light catches it and she has loved reflective surfaces since she was 4 months old. Adiz knows all of this. The guests at this party know none of it. To them, she is the woman with the tray. The professional photographer, a tall man with 2 cameras and a confident stride, is moving through the party now, documenting. He pauses at the activity station. He crouches. He takes several shots of the colored panels, the sensory bin, the soft afternoon light falling across the wooden frame. Then he straightens. He looks around for someone to credit. Claudia Whitfield appears at his elbow as though she was always going to be there. "This is gorgeous," the photographer says, gesturing at the station. "Who put this together?" Claudia smiles. It is a practice smile, warm and immediate and completely effortless. "Oh," she says, tilting her champagne flute slightly, "the planner handled it." The camera flashes. Adiz is standing 6 feet away, holding the tray, close enough to have heard every word. She does not react. Her face does not change. She has spent 11 months practicing the discipline of not reacting, and she is very good at it now. She turns. She moves toward a cluster of guests. She extends the tray. A woman in a cream blazer glances at her, holds out her empty champagne flute, and gestures vaguely to the left. "Kitchen's through there." It is not said cruelly. That is almost worse. It is said the way you speak to furniture, to a function, to something that exists to serve a purpose and has no interior life worth considering. Adiz takes the empty flute. She walks toward the house. And as she walks, she passes the activity station. Her station, every panel chosen by her hands, every element placed by her knowledge, and she does not look at it. She can't. Not right now. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. To understand what this moment costs her, you have to understand what it took to get here. You have to go back 11 months. You have to go back to the beginning. Adiz Okonkwo did not fall into childcare. She chose it, deliberately, specifically, against the advice of several people who thought she was aiming too low. She grew up in Enugu, in southeastern Nigeria, the second of 4 children, in a household where education was not optional and discipline was not negotiable. Her mother was a secondary school teacher who believed that the most important work any person could do was the work that shaped children's minds in the earliest years. Her father was an engineer who believed the most important work was the work that built things to last. Adiz, it turned out, agreed with both of them. She came to the United States on a student visa at 22. She completed her undergraduate degree in psychology at Southern Connecticut State University, working 20 hours a week at a daycare center to pay her rent, and graduated with a 3.8 GPA and a specific, sharpening interest in how environment shapes cognitive development in children under 3. She went directly into the graduate program at the University of Bridgeport. Her thesis was on the relationship between caregiver responsiveness and language acquisition in infants from birth to 18 months. She was not doing this casually. She was not doing this as a placeholder until something better came along. This was the thing. This was the work she had built her adult life around. After graduate school, she spent 3 years at a private developmental childcare center in Westport, Connecticut, the kind of place where parents paid serious money for serious early childhood programming, and where the staff held actual credentials. She was good at the work. She was, by any honest measure, exceptional at it. She received 2 promotions in 3 years and was in the middle of building a curriculum framework for the infant room when the center lost its lease and closed with 6 weeks' notice. That was the moment the Whitfields found her. The listing came through a premium childcare placement agency, one of the ones that charges families a finder's fee and vets applicants through background checks, reference calls, and in-person interviews. The listing was specific and, at the time, seemed promising. Seeking early childhood development specialist for full-time, in-home role with family in Fairfield County. 1 child, female, 10 weeks old at start date. Role requires certified professional with documented experience in infant development. Must have graduate-level credentials or equivalent. Salary commensurate with experience. Professional development role, not a general childcare position. That last line. Adiz read it twice. Professional development role, not a general childcare position. It was the kind of language that told her someone in that family understood the distinction, understood that what she did was not babysitting with a fancier name. She applied. She was called for a phone screening, then an in-person interview. The interview was conducted primarily by Claudia Whitfield, in the living room of the Whitfield home on a Wednesday morning. The house was large and immaculate and smelled faintly of eucalyptus. Claudia was polished and articulate and asked genuinely good questions about developmental milestones, about her philosophy on infant stimulation, about how she approached attachment theory in a non-primary caregiver context. Adiz was impressed. She told herself, "This woman knows what she's looking for." She was not wrong. She just didn't yet understand what Claudia was actually looking for. The contract was prepared by Richard Whitfield, an attorney by training, and it was thorough. Adiz read it carefully, 3 times, which was a habit with any document that mattered. The role was clearly defined: early childhood development specialist, 35 hours per week, with specific duties enumerated across 2 pages. Developmental programming, daily structured routines, bi-weekly written progress reports, consultation on environmental setup of the infant space. No household duties, no cooking, no cleaning, no elder care. The scope was explicit. And critically, there was a clause for scope expansion. Any duties requested outside the defined scope of this role must be agreed to in writing and will be compensated at the specialist rate specified in Appendix B. She signed it on a Thursday. She started the following Monday. Chloe Whitfield was 10 weeks old and weighed 11 pounds and had a small, specific way of turning her head towards sound that Adiz noticed in the first hour and documented that evening. The first 2 months were close to what the contract described. Adiz arrived each morning at 7:30. She spent her days in the infant room, a well-lit space on the 2nd floor that she gradually transformed, over the first 2 weeks, from a standard nursery into a developmentally appropriate environment. She repositioned the crib, introduced a visual tracking mobile she assembled herself from materials she brought from home, established a sensory rotation on the floor mat, and created a daily log that tracked Chloe's feeding times, sleep patterns, awake windows, and behavioral responses to stimulation. Claudia observed these changes with what seemed like genuine interest. She asked questions. She engaged. In those early weeks, she and Adiz had real professional conversations about attachment, about overstimulation, about why Adiz was introducing black and white contrast cards rather than the pastel toys the nursery had been stocked with. Adiz thought, "This is the job. This is exactly the job." But even in those early weeks, there were small things. A request to bring Chloe downstairs during a Tuesday morning when the cleaning service came, because the sound of the vacuum distressed her. Reasonable. Adiz brought her down. Stayed in the kitchen while it ran. While she was in the kitchen, Claudia mentioned, almost in passing, that there was some pasta in the fridge that needed to be eaten. Could Adiz just heat it up for lunch? It was barely anything. Just the microwave. Adiz heated the pasta. She told herself, "It's nothing. It's one time." 3 weeks later, Claudia mentioned she had a dentist appointment and the grocery order wasn't going to arrive until after 6. Could Adiz just stop by Stop and Shop on her way home and grab a few things? She'd reimburse her. She texted a list. Adiz went to Stop and Shop. She told herself, "It's nothing. One time. This is how it works. This is always how it works." Not a demand. A request. Not a policy. A favor. Each one small enough that refusing it feels disproportionate, feels difficult, feels unkind. And each one, once performed, becomes the new floor. The baseline shifts. And no one acknowledges that the baseline has shifted, because acknowledging it would require confronting what is actually happening. By month 3, the groceries were weekly. By month 4, Adiz was also prepping Chloe's pureed meals. Reasonable enough, given her role, she told herself, except that she was prepping the family's dinner ingredients at the same time, because she was already in the kitchen, because it seemed petty not to. By month 5, Claudia's mother came to stay for 2 weeks while recovering from a hip replacement. The mother's name was Barbara. She was 71 years old, sharp, occasionally demanding, and completely outside the scope of Adiz's employment contract. Adiz helped Barbara to the bathroom twice on her first day, because Barbara asked and there was no one else there and refusing felt impossible in the moment. She did not log it that day. She logged it the next day. In her spiral notebook. The one she kept in her bag. She was not keeping the notebook because she suspected she would need it. She was keeping it because she had always kept detailed records. It was a professional habit, a holdover from her years at the developmental center where every interaction was documented as a matter of policy. She kept the notebook the way some people keep receipts, not because they plan to dispute the charges, but because order is how they manage the world. She had no idea, in month 5, sitting in the Whitfield kitchen writing Barbara, bathroom assistant X2, not in contract, that those words would one day sit inside a manila folder across a table from Claudia Whitfield and a man in a grey suit. She just wrote them down because she wrote everything down. In month 6, Richard Whitfield came home early on a Friday and found Adiz in the infant room running a language stimulation activity with Chloe, narrating her own actions in clear, simple language, pausing for Chloe's responses, tracking her eye contact, doing the specific, patient, evidence-based work that most people would look at and see as simply talking to a baby. Richard stood in the doorway for a moment before Adiz noticed him. When she did, she stood. He held up a hand, "Don't stop," and watched for another minute. Then he said, "She's doing well. You can see it." "She is," Adiz said. "Her receptive language is ahead of the curve. She's been responding to her name consistently for about 3 weeks now." Richard nodded slowly. "We appreciate what you're doing," he said. "Claudia and I both. You've been exceptional." He put it in writing the following week. An email, formal enough to feel deliberate. "We want to note our appreciation for the quality of Adiz's work with Chloe. Her expertise and dedication have been exceptional and we are grateful she is part of our family." Adiz saved it. She saved everything. She did not know yet that she would need it. She saved it because she saved everything. Month 7. Month 8. Month 9. Each month the work outside her contract expanded slightly. Each month the acknowledgement of her professional role contracted slightly. These are not dramatic events. There is no single morning where Claudia looks at Adiz and says, "You are no longer a specialist, you are staff." It doesn't happen that way. It never happens that way. It happens in the language. In the small substitutions. It happens when Claudia begins introducing Adiz to visitors as our nanny instead of by name. The first time, Adiz catches it and feels something, a small, sharp thing, but says nothing. She tells herself, nanny is easier for people to understand. It's not a demotion. It's just a word. It happens when the bi-weekly progress reports Adiz submits stop receiving responses. She writes them still, detailed, professional, formatted correctly, and sends them to the shared email thread where Richard and Claudia are both copied. For the first 4 months, Claudia responded to every one, sometimes briefly, sometimes at length. From month 6 onward, Claudia's responses become sparse and then absent. Adiz writes the reports anyway. She sends them anyway. She dates them carefully in the subject line. It happens when Claudia begins texting Adiz assignments directly. "Can you call the pediatrician and reschedule Chloe's 9-month appointment? I forgot and I have a lunch," without framing them as requests. Just instructions. The shift is subtle, but it is real. From could you to can you to no question at all. Just a task, issued and expected to be completed. By month 9, Adiz is doing the following things that are not in her contract: weekly grocery shopping, regular meal preparation for the household, scheduling and managing all pediatric appointments, occasionally receiving and signing for packages, managing correspondence with a contractor hired to renovate the Whitfield mudroom, and, whenever Barbara visits, which has become quarterly, providing supplemental care assistance to a 71-year-old woman whose needs are legitimate but whose care is nowhere in Adiz's professional scope. She logs every single one. Not because she has a plan. Not yet. Because she is Adiz Okonkwo, and she writes things down, and somewhere in her is the person her mother raised, methodical, careful, precise, who understands without being told that the truth of a thing is not what anyone says it was. The truth of a thing is what was written, and when, and by whom. Chloe Whitfield turned 1 year old on the 14th of June. Claudia began planning the birthday party in April. This was not unusual. Adiz had come to understand that Claudia's social life was managed with the same precision and forward momentum that other people reserved for strategic business operations. The party was for 40 guests. Catered. Photographed. Themed in soft yellow and white. Adiz was not involved in the planning. She was informed of the date and told to keep it clear. Then, in the first week of May, Claudia came to her with what she described as an idea. "I want to do an activity station," she said. "Something developmentally appropriate, not just toys, but actual learning activities. Something that shows people we actually think about this stuff." She used the word we. Adiz understood what was being asked. She designed the station over 2 weeks in her own time, evenings and one Saturday morning, sourcing materials from 3 different suppliers, building the wooden frame herself with the help of a YouTube tutorial and a drill she borrowed from her neighbor. She chose each sensory element deliberately: the textured panels for tactile exploration, the mirror for self-recognition work, the sensory bin calibrated for safe manipulation by a 1-year-old. She wrote out a small informational card for each element explaining its developmental purpose, which she planned to display alongside the station so parents could understand what they were looking at. She set it up the morning of the party, 2 hours before the guests arrived, while Claudia was upstairs getting dressed. When Claudia came downstairs and saw it, she paused. "That's perfect," she said. Then she took the informational cards off the display, gently, without commentary, and set them aside on the kitchen counter. "I don't want it to feel like a lecture," she said, and moved on. Adiz looked at the cards on the counter. She said nothing. The guests began arriving at noon. Adiz was in the kitchen. She had not been asked to work the party. It was a Saturday, technically her day off, but Claudia had called her on Thursday and mentioned that it would be really helpful if she came. There was no offer of additional pay for the additional day. Adiz came anyway. She came because Chloe was turning 1 year old and she had watched every day of that year. By noon, she was wearing an apron. She was not entirely sure when that had happened, somewhere between arriving and the catering team asking if she was with them, and her saying no, and someone then handing her an apron and asking if she could manage the past appetizers. She had said yes because Claudia was standing nearby and had nodded, and that had seemed like enough. So she was passing appetizers in an apron on her day off at the first birthday party of a child she had raised, and she told herself it didn't matter. It was one afternoon, it would be over by 4. The photographer arrived at 12:30. He was professional and efficient and moved through the party with the particular energy of someone who has documented 200 events like this one and knows exactly what he is doing. He photographed Chloe, who was dressed in a yellow dress with a white collar and was managing the stimulation of 40 people reasonably well. He photographed the grazing board and the string lights and the small cluster of guests near the oak trees. Then he found the activity station. He crouched. He took several shots. He stood. He looked around, the natural thing, the automatic thing, the thing every photographer does when they find something worth crediting, and his gaze landed on Claudia, who was the obvious center of the event, champagne flute in hand, cream linen blazer, hair up. "This is gorgeous," he said, nodding at the station. "Who put this together?" Claudia smiled. "Oh," she said, tilting her flute slightly. "The planner handled it." The camera flashed. Adiz was standing 6 feet away. She heard every word. She was holding the tray, silver, rectangular, 3 glasses arranged on it, and she was close enough that if the photographer had simply turned his head slightly to the left, he would have seen her. But he didn't turn his head. Why would he? He had his answer. The planner. Of course. That's how these things work. You hire people to handle things. The planner handled it. Adiz stood there for 1 second. 2. Then she turned. She moved toward the nearest cluster of guests. She extended the tray. A woman in a cream blazer looked up from her conversation. She glanced at Adiz, at her but not seeing her, the particular social glance that processes the function without acknowledging the person, and held out an empty champagne flute. She gestured vaguely to the left. kitchen's through there. Not cruel. Not unkind. Simply absent. The woman had already turned back to her conversation before the sentence was finished. Adiz took the flute. She turned. She walked toward the house. The kitchen was cool and quiet relative to the garden. The catering team moved around her efficiently. Adiz placed the empty flute on the counter. She stood for a moment with her hands flat on the cool tile surface and she breathed, slowly, the way you breathe when you're keeping something very heavy very still. She thought about the informational cards. Still on the counter upstairs. Probably. The ones she'd written explaining each element of the station, its developmental purpose, the research behind it, the specific way it was calibrated for a 12-month-old's motor and sensory development. She thought about the foil panel. How she'd known Chloe would reach for it first. How she was right. She thought about Richard's email. Exceptional. She picked up the tray. She went back outside. She did not look at the activity station. The party ended at 4:15. Adiz stayed until 4:30 to help manage Chloe, who was overtired and overstimulated in the specific way Adiz had predicted she would be, a prediction she had shared with Claudia the week before, along with a suggested schedule for the day to minimize it. The schedule had not been followed. She settled Chloe in the crib at 4:40. Stroked her hair once. Stood for a moment in the doorway of the room she had spent 11 months transforming. Then she left. She drove home. She did not know yet what was waiting for her on her phone. She found it 4 days later. She was not looking for it. She was updating her professional profile on the childcare placement platform, a routine maintenance task, the kind she did every few months, keeping her availability status current and her credentials up to date. She typed her own name into the search function to see how her profile appeared in results. The review appeared below her profile. It had been posted 2 days after the birthday party. The username was not Claudia's name. It was a screen name, CTMom 2023, but the placement agency's platform required verified accounts linked to real employment relationships, and the employment relationship was clearly identified. Former employer, 11-month engagement, Fairfield County, CT. There was only one employer that fit that description. She read it once. We hired Adiz based on strong agency recommendations, and she is clearly educated and capable with young children. However, over the course of our engagement, we found that she had difficulty maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. She occasionally overstepped in ways that required redirection, and ultimately we felt we needed a different fit for our family. We wish her well, but would encourage other families to clearly define role expectations in advance. She read it again. Slowly this time. Looking at each sentence individually, the way you examine a document when something in it doesn't add up. Difficulty maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. Overstepped in ways that required redirection. She sat very still. In 11 months, she had never been told, not once, not in any form, not verbally, not in writing, not in passing, that she had overstepped anything. There had been no formal review, no performance conversation, no documented concern of any kind. Richard Whitfield had put in writing, 6 weeks ago, that her work was exceptional and that they were grateful she was part of their family. 6 weeks ago. And now, difficulty maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. She scrolled down. There was a closing line. A lovely person, but not quite what we needed. She read it a third time. A lovely person, but not quite what we needed. That final line. She stayed on it. There is something particular about that construction, lovely person, that performs generosity while delivering a verdict. It is the language of dismissal dressed as kindness. It says, I am not being cruel. I am simply being honest. She is fine. Just not enough. Just not right. Just not quite. Adiz sat with her phone in her hands for a long time. She thought, I heated her pasta. I drove to Stop and Shop every Tuesday for 5 months. I managed her contractor's schedule. I helped her mother to the bathroom. I designed an activity station in my own time with my own materials on my own money, and I set it up at 6:30 in the morning before anyone else was awake, and I stood 6 feet away while she told a photographer that the planner handled it. She thought. I wrote 22 bi-weekly progress reports. I documented every milestone. I was there the morning Chloe first pulled herself to standing, and I called out for Claudia, and Claudia didn't come, and I sat on the floor alone with this child who had just done something extraordinary, and I said, quietly, because there was no one else there to say it to, look at you. Look at you. She thought, not quite what we needed. She did not cry. She wanted to. There was something pressing against the inside of her chest, something that needed somewhere to go, but she was too tired. Not physically. Something deeper than that. The specific exhaustion that comes from spending a long time being very careful about how much space you take up, how much you react, how much you allow yourself to feel in rooms where your feelings are not the point. She locked her phone. She put it face down on the passenger seat. She sat in the dark of the Stop and Shop parking lot, because she was at Stop and Shop, of course, because she was there every Tuesday, because that was her life now, and she did not move for a while. Outside, people moved past with their carts. A man lifted a child into a car seat. The automatic doors slid open and shut, open and shut. Inside the car, Adiz stared at the steering wheel. Not quite what we needed. She said it out loud once. Quietly. To no one. Just to hear what it sounded like in the actual air. Then she opened the glove compartment. She took out the spiral notebook. She uncapped the pen. She wrote the date at the top of a fresh page. The time, 7:14 p.m. Beneath it, she wrote, Tuesday grocery run, not in contract. She looked at the line. She turned back one page. Then another. Then another. Page after page of dates and tasks and small, careful notations in her own handwriting. 11 months of work that was never part of the agreement. Documented with the quiet, habitual precision of a woman who had spent her career understanding that the truth of a thing is not what anyone says it was. She turned back to the new page. Below the grocery run notation, she wrote one more line. Review posted. No prior complaint on record. Check Richard's email. She capped the pen. She sat for another moment. Then she started the car. She did not know yet what the notebook would become. She did not know about the 47 emails. She had not yet laid the folders side by side on a kitchen table at midnight. She had not yet read the line that would change the temperature of everything. She just knew what she always knew, that the work she did was real, and that real things, documented carefully, do not disappear. She pulled out of the Stop and Shop parking lot. She drove home in the dark. And in the back seat, in 2 canvas grocery bags, were the Whitfield family's groceries for the week, paid for on her debit card, to be reimbursed on Friday. Because that was how it worked now, that was just how it worked, and they shifted gently against each other as she turned, as the city moved past the windows. As Adiz Okonkwo drove home alone on a Tuesday night with 11 months of someone else's life in her hands and her own life narrowing quietly around her. Part 2. The Fallout and the Folders, coming next. If you enjoyed this story, don't click away just yet. Our next underdog journey is waiting, and it might surprise you even more. Explore the channel and continue the experience. One story leads to another, and each one proves that being underestimated is often the beginning of something powerful. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story.